Live from the chicken wing capital of the world, Buffalo, New York. You're listening to the Childcare Bridge podcast, your source for the best tips, tools, and tactics on how to market and grow your childcare center, ensuring total domination. Total domination. This is the Childcare Bridge, and this is your host, Michael Tasner.
So first off, let me be one of the first people to say Happy New Year's. I am beyond excited for what 2026 has in store for you. In today's episode of the Childcare Bridge, I wanted to look back at the last 12 months, and I wanted to share with you in order, the top searched, the top listened to podcasts, and give you the one big idea, the one big action step from each of those. Now, in the last year, I did 50 plus podcast episodes. Every single week, I brought you a new episode. I went on lots of other podcasts, so there's lots and lots of content. But what I try to do is to give you actionable content backed by data that you can go and move into fruition. That it's not just you listening saying, wow, that was a good idea. I don't think I can do that. I try and give you the play-by-play, and that's how I will continue this year and beyond. And there's just a lot of amazing things that we have in store for you this year. So they'll be in order, but these all were the top hits. So, number one, without further ado, this episode was titled, It's Not Them, It's You. And I'll give you at least a little bit of the backstory for the episode, and then I will make sure, again, I give you that big idea from the episode that you can action. But in this episode, I really talked about how childcare owners and directors, they're constantly saying we have staffing issues, staffing problems, people issues, they're not like what they used to be, no one wants to work, basically giving the woe is me story. Now, I deal with the same challenges that you do as well. However, in this episode, I laser in on this point of, is it really them? Now, in some cases, 1,000%, it's them. But the exercise that I went through, and the big idea for this episode, was that you write out the situation at hand. So let's say that you're arguing with one of your team members about cell phone use in the classroom. Okay? Let's just use that one as, that's always an interesting one that starts to spur up lots of controversies. So I want you to write that out, and I want you to write out all of the facts of the situation. They were caught using their cell phone. They were on it for X time. So you might write down, well, they were on it for 2 hours, but in reality, the facts are 30 seconds. So I want to make sure that it's all facts, not feelings. Once you've got that, I want you to go through and continue to ask yourself, is this true? Is this true? Is this true? Is this true? And then I want you to pivot to say, based on all the facts, based on the other feelings of the situation. So as you have the facts down, you then add some of the feelings. I'm pissed off about this. I've asked them so many times, and I like all these feelings. Is that going to get you what you want? Is the first question. So having all these feelings. And number two is, are you to blame, and or do you play some part of this story? So think about that one for just a second. What if the facts were they were on their phone for 30 seconds because their kids are at home with their spouse and they're sick and they just wanted to check the phone? Now, again, you might play, Michael, come on, be real. Like, they're on it all the time. But I want you to continue to look at the actual situation and see, how are you potentially playing a role in what's happening? Do you not have enough breaks that they can go and and actually check their phone on breaks? Is there not an actual break room or a space that they feel they can do that maybe doesn't have cameras? Is there not a formal policy to where, well, there's a formal policy, but it's not followed? Or are there other people that are in the classroom that you do allow to be on their phone, but they don't? So as you start to look at the situation, what ends up happening is you start to realize that a lot of times it's not them, it's you. When I'm having either some anxiety or I'm frustrated with a team member over something, I start to write all this stuff out, and then often I realize really the root issue is X. I don't have a good system. I don't have a great process. There's not a training for this. I didn't set an expectation properly. Usually the buck ends up kind of pointing back at me. So that's one that I wanted you to ponder. And it's not just with staffing, but it's anything that's happening not only in your center, but also in your life. If you're getting frustrated with your spouse and you're writing all these things down and you start to realize, well, that's interesting. Like I'll write on my wife, she's mad because I'm having to work late and doesn't she know, and trying to pay for all these holiday gifts and things like that. But then when I really look at it in reality, well, your wife just wants to spend quality time with you. Like, well, geez, and I'm getting all crazy. So often we are the biggest problem. Second episode was all about marketing math. And I'm glad this was one of the top listened to ones, because this is something that I harp on almost every single episode. The premise of this one is very, very basic. Everything at your centers comes down to marketing math and math in general. So let's say you've got, and we'll just look at one location that you have. You've got 100 currently, your capacity is 200. You've got this gap of 100 families. You can reverse engineer. Instead of playing the woe is me game and I don't know how to get there and I don't know how to grow, you can reverse engineer this down to the penny. Almost said penty. Down to the penny, to figure out what do you need to do to actually buy an enrollment. Buy an enrollment. Cost per enrollment, CPE. And if you find out, well, geez, we can invest $1,000, and every $1,000 we invest, we get a new enrollment. And that new enrollment, full-time equivalent, spits off $1,500 a month in tuition every single month. And then on average, they stay for 2 years. So as you get this math down, it literally just becomes a scaling question around math. How many more leads do we need? How many more tours? And this carries over into everything else. If you need more staff, great. How many resumes do you need? How many interviews need to happen to equal one new teacher? Great, we need 100 resumes. We screen those. 20 of them are good. We end up connecting with 10 people. We do 3 in-person interviews, 1 no-shows, and we hire one of the 2. Great. What does it cost to then get those 50 resumes or those 100 resumes? Great. $50 a resume. Okay, great. So to get one new teacher, $50 a resume, 50 resumes, $2,500, for example. You're able to reverse engineer all of this to back into your goals, to back into everything. So it's not just the marketing math, but everything at your centers is simply math. New acquisitions, it's a math equation. Where to open up a new location, it's a math equation. You look at the demand compared to how many centers are already there. You can look at the math and make an educated decision. It's just math. And the way that I've grown all of my centers, the way that we grow all the centers that we do the marketing for, the way that I grow businesses in general is through marketing math. I know my numbers, I track them, and then I'm not afraid to invest because I know that we have the data to back it up. And then you track it every single month. The third one was all about open houses versus micro events. So it's been the norm for, I don't even know how long, maybe 100 years, I don't even know, to do open houses. And whether that's once a year or a couple of times a year, to do an open house for a new location, If you need some more enrollments, you do another open house. The challenge with open houses is that there's a difference of an open house / community event and what I call a micro event that's more targeted to enrollment. Open houses tend to be more community driven events. You get more people coming from the community. They want free food. Maybe you've got a bounce house, some activities, but they're not tailored to typically generating enrollments. In this episode, I talked to you about doing more regular micro events where they're completely tailored to an enrollment experience. You have everything choreographed, you have the different activities, you can still have food and make it very nice, but you're strategically inviting people rather than advertising this all over the place. These micro events cost much less money. They're easier to execute, faster to execute, and they're enrollment focused. That doesn't mean don't throw a fun open house community event, but you have to understand that if you're going to do that, you can't be upset if you only get 1 or 2 enrollments and you invest thousands of dollars, for example, in food and entertainment and things like that. That's more of a goodwill. But my suggestion to you in this episode is to look at doing anywhere between 4 and 6 micro events this year. So now we're 3 episodes in, continuing to move to the number 1 most listened to episode as well. All right, so we've talked about it's most likely you, not them. We've talked about micro events, and we've talked about marketing math. The 4th most listened to, actually technically it'd be the fourth, I'm going from bottom to top, is all about hiring and how to actually hire great people. And while this one had a lot of takeaways, the action step for you is pretty laser dialed in. You need to identify not just competing centers, but all the competing employers in your area and make sure that you have an attractive offer and an attractive environment to grab team. You're not competing solely with the other centers in your area for staff. You're just not. Why would a teacher go and work at your center for $12 an hour if they can go and make $16 an hour plus benefits at Starbucks, plus college tuition, plus stock options, plus unlimited espresso? So, well, Michael, don't they like working with kids? That they do, but at $4 an hour, that's not an immaterial difference. I mean, you're talking $150 a week. You're talking $400 or $500 a month. That can be the difference of somebody being able to pay their mortgage or not. So you've got to really analyze your numbers. That's why I talk a lot about, obviously, the marketing math stuff. But you've got to be able to afford good people. You've got to have attractive benefits. You've got to have attractive offerings, or it's going to be very, very challenging for you to grab those team. It doesn't matter how good your job ad is or how fancy your centers are. If you are underpaying and you don't have some incentives to keep them there, you're going to have a revolving door. Unfortunately, that's just how it is. The next one, we talked about how to budget for marketing. So the big idea on this one was, how much should you actually be investing in marketing? And this was one that opened up Pandora's box. I had even some hate mail, which was interesting. But we talked through the formula of looking at, where do you want to be? So going back to that marketing math question, where do you want to be in terms of gross revenue in the next 12 months? And when you have that number, I want you to get a percentage, which I'll share with you in a minute, and then have a little bit of wiggle room as you're figuring out your numbers. Now, where this started to get some hate mail is that, candidly, the industry averages are less than 5%. And believe it or not, there are some centers that tell me 2 or 3% is what they're investing. My suggestion to you is at minimum 7%. I would love to see you 10%, 12%, or higher. So, Michael, how do we make that happen? When you know your numbers, when you reverse engineer the marketing math and you have your cost per acquisition, your cost per enrollment, as long as those enrollments are profitable, why would you cap your marketing? To me, it makes absolutely no sense. And so what happens when we get full? You continue to market, you scale it back and you run branding ads, but you don't stop marketing. And that's where I get that hate mail of, well, why would I just invest that money? Well, the reason you do that is that I've seen every single thing happen that takes your enrollments from you, directors leaving, and then all of a sudden half the enrollments are out the door. I've seen so much craziness happen. It's beyond me. Like, can only imagine what I've seen. If you want to grow, you do this through marketing. You out-market everyone else. You out-invest everyone else. And you do those numbers off of your projected numbers, not what you did last year. If you're at $1 million and you want to get to $2 million, why do you think that you could just grow $1 million with the exact same marketing budget? It makes no sense. And this is my tough love for childcare center owners. Last but not least, the number one, listen to, and this was by a large margin, and I'm glad this was the case. The podcast title was called Raise Your Tuition. All the stuff that we just talked about, investing more in marketing, paying your team more, knowing your numbers. If you do not continue to raise your tuition and or charge not only market rates, but ideally a little bit of a premium. If you're the lowest in the industry by a long shot, it's going to be very, very challenging for you. The days of being able to offer $150 a week tuition for a full-time equivalent, they're long gone. I mean, we used to have centers that their average tuition was, $150. I'm like, I'm doing the math. How are you making money on $600 a month, full-time equivalent? $600. You have to raise your tuitions. And the centers that have done this, we had one, I'm trying to think the exact, I don't know if she was in Seattle. She added over $250,000 to her bottom line. Bottom line, not top line. Bottom line, by raising tuition. Now, in this episode, I'm not going to try and recap every single thing. I'm giving you the one big idea, and the one big idea is raise your rates. Number one, raise them every single year. Number two, raise them for all new families. Number three, look at raising them again. Don't price yourself so far out of the market, but most centers, when I look at their rates, are undercharging. So how did you get these numbers? Well, we called around our competitors and then we tried to find an average. That is not going to work. So what if you're in a building that's 2 times nicer than everyone else and your monthly lease payment is double? How are you going to make those numbers work by going off of averages from the competition? That doesn't make sense. You've got to charge not only what you're worth, but ideally premium tuition so that you can expand, so that you can take a salary. My final comment for you for 2025 and now 2026 is the king and queen eat first. We got in this industry to make a difference, to help kids' lives. But if you are suffering personally, if your family is suffering, if your health is suffering because you're losing sleep over your centers, that is not going to work for next year. I need you to be making a nice living, having money in the bank so that you can be in the right frame of mind so that you can continue to grow and make that impact. If your ship goes down, the rest of the ships follow suit. 2026 is going to be your year. I'm here to support you every step of the way as your coach, your mentor, your trainer. And if we can help in any way, reach out. We're here to help. Michael Tasner signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'll see you next week.